You know, many ambitious men are driven not by their ambitions. Of course, that's one thing about them. They're ambitious, they have drive, they they're go-getters, they go after it. A lot of times, many of us are driven by this innate fear of being regular. We don't really fear failure. Failure to us is like, it's like whatever, we fell, we'll get back up. But a fear that we all carry is the fear of being regular, the fear of being average, the average man. Being like everybody else out there in the world and not being able to distinguish ourselves, right? And, it's only common and it only makes sense. We all want to be different, we all want to stand out. Everybody in this world, I don't care who you are. We are all nuanced. We are all different in one shape or form. We have people to us that are similar, but we all ultimately have different spirits. With this fear, though, it's a healthy fear if you frame it the right way. If your fear of being regular is having the virtues and the attributes of the average man, you know, and you want to distinguish yourself, stand out by not having their virtues, by not being like them, that's fine. But what I've come to find is that many ambitious men, we don't separate ourselves by who we are. We separate ourselves and place our value in what we have, in the success that we have or the lack thereof. Our value is conditional. What do I mean by that? We place who we are in what we have, in the success that we have or lack thereof. Now, this looks like you always feel the need to be ready, right? You never, let's say you're starting a business venture. You don't start that business because you don't feel like you're ready. You don't feel like, let's say, for example, a fitness business, right? You don't feel like you have the body to be qualified enough to teach fitness, right? To start a business, a fitness business. Let's say if that's something you wanted to do. You never feel ready. You never feel qualified because your value is conditional. You have conditioned yourself to place your value in what you have or what you don't have. And see, the problem with that is, I'm not saying you don't need to be qualified to do certain things. You have to make yourself qualified to do certain things. And that's how you become qualified, if that makes sense. We're never truly ready. We choose to be ready. The problem with your value being conditional is that you begin to lean into titles and identity, lean into titles, really, lean into what you have to prove who you are. And anytime you're performing, anytime you're placing your value in things external, if those things are taken away from you, you will lose your self-worth. And it'll go to expose that you really don't believe you're worth it unless you have certain things in your life. So the fear of being regular, the fear of being average does not really come from you wanting to stand out. It comes from your value being conditional. A standout man is going to stand out regardless of what he has or doesn't have. The average man is like everybody else because of their virtues, because of who they are, not because of what they have. I've seen average men have success and still be average, still be like everybody else. I've seen great men be janitors, but when they walk into rooms, they're still able to take over and let their presence be felt. And this is something that society has conditioned us men into today, that our values based on our titles, our values based on what we have or what we don't have. And like I said, this becomes very dangerous because the moment you don't have this thing that you feel like needs to validate you standing out, you will never taste peace. You will never taste wholeness. You will never recognize your own greatness. You'll never recognize that, look, I actually had the courage. I actually went out there as a man to go build the lifestyle that I wanted to. You will say to yourself, the lifestyle made me into the man that I am. And when you're living that lifestyle, you will still feel internally shakable. You will still feel the need to chase. You will still feel the need to validate your worth despite having so much. You shouldn't feel afraid of being regular. The moment that you let go of this fear, the moment that you let go of feeling the need to stand out, is when you actually stand out. Because to be honest with you, most people today have this fear. Like I said, it's a healthy fear if you allow it to be. But the moment that you let go of this fear is the day you actually allow yourself to stand out. It's the day that you actually allow yourself to be who you are, because that's really all it is. The fear of being regular is tied to you feeling like you can be who you are without having something or a title to be yourself. The fear of being regular is really the fear or the lack of permission that you give yourself to be who you actually are. And I want you to sit with that for a minute, because that's something that I had to sit with, you know. I've always been very competent, always been very ambitious, always been very different. And this led a lot of people to tell me, you're crazy. How can you do that? The 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 um the lengths that you go after the things you want in this life are insane. But the thing is, what I never realized was that I was using these things to validate who I am. And this would show up in conversation with people. I always felt the need to distinguish myself from the crowd. And I would say certain things to make me stand out. I would explain my ambitions. I wouldn't say my ambitions, I would declare them. I've always done that. I always thought it was a healthy thing to declare your ambitions, to show, to be an inspiration, but I would explain them. I felt the need to, okay, look, see, bro, this is what I'm doing. What about you? Instead of like, oh, this is what I'm doing, like, what do you got going on? It was never from a moment, it was never from a place of we're sharing dreams. It was more like, look at my dream, look at what I'm doing. I deserve, I deserve the praise because I'm ambitious. I'm going after it. If you're really different, you wouldn't feel the need to explain you're different. You would walk around with that certainty that you are different. You would walk around with the I already know I stand out. I don't have to explain myself. And I found myself explaining myself very often. You don't understand. It's not the same for you. And the funny thing is that when I finally let this go and accepted that I was different, not because of what I didn't have or what I did have, this made everything else in my life a lot easier. It made creating connections a lot easier, especially with women, creating connections with women. I didn't feel the need to have have success to now have a good woman. I didn't feel the need to, flaunt money or, be some type of way to have women. And that's something that society teaches us today. If you don't have a certain amount of something, you cannot be with women. And that's, relating to a topic that I made the other day, that many men hide behind their aspirations and their ambitions before they actually allow themselves to date. And I said that was flawed, because what happens when you're out there dating, you have the money, but now you have a lot more targets on your back. You're not going to have the discernment to be able to vet these women out, because you waited until you had everything to actually get them. Our value is not conditioning. Our value is based on who we are. And when you root yourself in something that can be taken away from you, the moment it's taken away from you, you lose all sense of self. And that's exactly what happened to me, you know? So my my drive was always based on, I need to stand out. I need to be different. I need to prove who I am. I need to prove I'm not like everybody else. And the truth is, anytime you are ambitious and you actually initiate and actually go after the lifestyle that you want, you aren't like anybody else. But it's not because of what you're doing, it's because of who you are, because you're actually putting yourself out there. It means that you have a certain level of self belief in yourself, self trust in yourself, that the average person does not have. And that's so much more valuable, virtuous than, I have X, Y, and Z. And this makes you stand out, because you know what? Everybody is just trying to be real. Everybody attaches themselves to people who just allow them to be themselves. When you let go of this performative state with women in your dating life, you're gonna see that if you just be yourself, if you let go of all these things that these men tell you in these spaces where, oh, you need to stand out and you need to have this and that, before you get the, bruh, you'll be fucking, you could be who you are right now, dead ass. You might not have the abs, you might not be rich, you might not be that, you might not have this, but if you know who the fuck you are and you're proud of that and you just allow yourself to be, bro, the woman will fucking just flock to you, because you're creating a safe enough environment for her to be herself. Even with men, like, you'll find yourselves in situations where you're meeting people, and within 5-10 minutes they're telling you their life story, and they're just like, oh, like, I just felt so comfortable sharing this with you, because you're not fucking performing anymore. There's no reason for you to feel like you have to explain how different you are from the rest. You don't feel the need to be like, oh, I'm different, look at what I do. And that shit is so real, because that's what everybody else is doing. If you're on this channel, you are not like everybody else. But forget all that. Don't allow that to be the reason you're different. Give yourself permission to be real. And it starts with being honest with yourself. What makes me different? What about me makes me different? Not what I have makes me different. Because that's the mentality that many average men have. I'll end with this note. I used to have a mentor that would always say, a great player, talking about, football player, NBA player, soccer player, will be great in any era. In any generation, a great player will be great in any generation. When you could finally say that about yourself, that's when you know you're no longer regular.